Okay, welcome back. This is part two of the video workshop series Intro to Gaffing. Let's get started. Oh, hey, there we go. Okay, now we're going to move on and talk about the role of the gaffer. This video will focus on pre-production aspects of being the gaffer. So first off, that needs to happen is you need to get a call from somebody they'll ask you if you're interested and available to work. And there's just a couple questions that you should probably ask and get answers to before you sign on to the job. Some important questions would be, I guess first of all, where is the job? I want to make sure that if where it is locally to you, or if it's not local, then there's a whole nother set of questions that we'll probably um, get to on a more intermediate gaffing um, video series. It's talking about travel and travel pay and all that stuff, but definitely should figure out where the job is. Another question to ask is what's the rate and what's the hourly minimum associated with that day rate, whether it's a 12-hour, 10-hour, 8-hour. Also, if it's payroll or invoice is a good question to ask. And you can also ask some crew questions like who's the DP, and as well as is there a budget for a key grip or a separate grip department? Just kind of getting a basic idea. You can kind of get a basic idea of the type, or not the type, but the size of the project based on what production's hoping or anticipating the crew size to be. That's another good question too. Actually, is what type of project is it? Is it a short film, music video, corporate thing, commercial, feature film? Okay, so once you kind of figure out, your rate and where it is and who the DP is and how big of a crew you can get, um, you'll probably sign some paperwork most likely and get all the negotiations kind of out of the way, and then you'll start to receive some creative information like a script or storyboards, reference images. There's a thing called like a creative deck when it kind of comes to commercials that kind of have maybe some storyboards, but a lot of reference images and kind of pictures that help describe the mood, as well as a bunch of text and talking about the project and how it's going to look and feel. So once you kind of have an idea about the look and the feel of the project, um, not all the time, but you will hopefully be able to tech scout. I've tech scouted for all kinds of projects, music videos, even corporate work. But some of the smaller things, and especially some of the simpler things, don't always necessarily need a tech scout. But I definitely think it really helps get everybody on the same page about what the limitations, or or what things are going to influence how the project's going to go as far as shooting it. So these pictures, this is from the feature film The Alternate, directed by Ulrich Purcell, and there we are standing across the street looking at an exterior of a house. And especially outside or even on location inside, you need to kind of worry about where the sun is. And basically, especially when shooting outside, you can kind of chat with the DP as well as the director and the first assistant director, as who's the ones in control of scheduling the shoot. Talk about when a good time to shoot exterior shots would be. Usually in the morning or late afternoon. Unless it's part of the look, shooting directly in the middle of the day, very toppy, hard sunlight if the sun's out. Um, some other a lot of logistical questions need to be kind of figured out, or at least get the ball rolling to figuring out, like truck parking and generator placement if you feel you need a generator. Um, just general gear staging, on set staging, where you're going to put all your carts, Even if you have a generator, somebody's probably going to use house power. If you're not going to use house power for lighting, you want to find the breaker box so that, if locations and hair and makeup and wardrobe all plug into the same 20 amp breaker and it trips a circuit, then you can help solve that problem by knowing where the breaker box is. And sometimes the breaker box is behind a door where you can't gain access to, so you need to communicate with production or locations to make sure that access to that breaker box will be there on the day. So yeah, and in more basic stuff, the director will kind of walk you through basic blocking of the scene, and the DP will begin to describe camera angles and how to shoot those scenes. And then from there is kind of where you can begin to develop a lighting plan for shots or scenes within the project. So once you kind of gather all your kind of technical information and logistical information and questions that need to be answered, a couple days later, or maybe later on the afternoon, but ideally a couple days later, so that there's time to kind of answer some questions, there will be a production meeting where you'll get all the department heads that went on the scout back together, either physically in a meeting, or I've definitely done telecommuting over the phone meetings, production meetings. We'll kind of go deeper into the proposed schedule and see if there's any tweaks to the schedule that makes sense as far as trying to make things run more efficiently for all the departments. And this is kind of a time for you to check up on certain questions. Oh, one good example that I like to use is, for that house scene as an example. Let's say, we have the house, we have access to all the rooms and backyard, side yard, front yard, the whole bit for the house that we're shooting in, but one scene might require, ideally, for the lighting to place a lamp, into the neighbor's backyard to shine through the back of the house or something like that. And so that's where we kind of need to start that question of, is it possible for us to place a lamp in the neighbor's backyard? You ask that to a producer or the first assistant director, or a locations manager that's on the scout with you. And at the production meeting, if that question doesn't get answered directly on set, or on the tech scout, then you can check in about the answer to that question at the production meeting and begin to develop an alternative plan or something if that question isn't answered, or if the answer is no. So after the production meeting, and not every time as well, but there might be a need for doing tests and building some custom fixtures or whatever. So here there's a picture. We did a portal light gag that needed to spin vertically. So we have two Astera tubes on a junior pin kind of light gag. I don't even know what you call it. We call it the whirly durly, but I know that's not the technical name for it. But it spins 360, and we rigged it with a 90-degree pin so that it can be horizontal or vertical. And so that was for the alternate film, and the key grip and I were at the shop playing around with grip equipment to kind of figure out how to spin that light, motivated from this portal of this sci-fi movie that we lit. And this picture on the right is just me building a custom light ribbon small fixture that gets placed in the screen of a laptop to motivate a laptop glow onto Talent's face. We wanted that to be RGB because it was kind of a more stylized piece. So, sometimes, especially the indie feature, I don't think, unfortunately, Ryan and I didn't get paid to do that lighting test, but, on a bigger project, for that little feature, but, on a bigger project, or just kind of depends on how you want to prioritize the things you want to negotiate with production, but you could certainly negotiate to get paid for a test shoot or a test lighting test day, or any hours that you spend. This was me at home building something. Um, and there's some other camera or other lighting tests that can be done, and usually ideally it would be done with the camera or with the DP or with the camera that you're going to be using for the shoot, as far as maybe some color tests, um, random weird practicals that art department wants to use that might be LED, shooting some tests with the camera to see if those sources of light flicker at all, um, or just any kind of unique specific lighting design that you want to shoot. And obviously it's best to take a look at some of those things in camera if that's possible. So then when you kind of come up with all that, you have your information from the Tech Scout. You've got questions answered. You've looked at the schedule and seen how many sets you need to have lit at the same time, or making sure you have enough gear to jump ahead and just kind of be a step ahead all the time. Once you kind of have all that, and you've narrowed things down through your lighting tests, then you have your gear list. So you comprise your gear list. You really got to make sure that you got everything on your gear list and submit it to the rental house, because the producer is going to need to approve that. And it's really kind of makes you look bad when your list is half built. It gets sent out. It gets the rental house shoots back a quote that's incomplete because your list was incomplete. The producer looks at it and goes, "Oh yeah, this looks great, approved." And then you have to say, "Oh, oops, there was X, Y, and Z wasn't on that list." I mean, sometimes that just kind of happens, but you really want to make sure your gear list is complete before the producer signs off on it. But if things are missing, that's just, we're human, so you just try to add them and get it dialed in as quickly as possible, so that if it doesn't end up getting approved, you can pivot accordingly and come up with alternative lighting designs to be within budget. And so ideally, once all that's been approved, and not every job has a prep day, but there could be a chance where you are allowed to be involved in the prep of the gear, which means that you go to the rental house, and there's a couple things you just want to, especially on a bigger project, some bigger bigger commercials, feature films, since they're so long, usually fight pretty hard for a prep day on there. But the prep day is going to the rental house and making sure that everything is there. You want to test fire all your lights, and then once everything's there and everything works and everything's accounted for, all your lamps that have scrims, they all have complete scrim sets and spare globes for all your fixtures and all that good stuff. And then you want to organize it and spend time putting it on carts and figuring out where things go in the truck and all that stuff. All happens on the prep day. Well, the gaffer is not necessarily testing M18s and making sure that this and that work, but depending on how big the show is, you can have a best electric with you, maybe even a set lighting technician with you, and the gaffer's kind of checking in, making sure that things are going well, but usually probably is also on the phone talking to the DP about any last minute notes, or another common thing is the gaffer communicating with production to making especially if things are not approved yet, um, trying to wrap up those conversations. Yeah, kind of all happen on the prep day, and at the end of the prep day, everything should be approved, and everything should be working order and loaded up and organized, ready to go. So that's pretty much all of the components of pre-pro as far as the role of the gaffer in any given project. In the next video, we'll talk about actually going into production and being involved in principal photography. So look out for that video. Thanks again for watching. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you on the next video.